It has been a while since I've done this. And yes, I know, I'm sorry, I have been a little MIA, but I am back and I am ready to talk about what the heck just happened in sports. It's been a crazy week. It's been a crazy month. It's been a crazy couple of months. It has been crazy. We just had the college football national championship game. We're about to have the Super Bowl in about a week. Unrivaled is in the middle of its second season. We have the NBA season going on right now, and some things have happened. Like, it has been insane. So, we're going to be talking all about that in this episode. Host for today, and today we are going to be talking about everything that has happened in sports in the past week. So before we get started, please be sure to check out the description box down below. That'll give you the links to my social media pages, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook, my X account, my Threads account. That's where I will post daily news and scores about what has happened in sports. My Snapchat is also linked in the description box down below, and that'll just show you what a day in the life looks like for me. I have also dropped a newsletter. The first issue has dropped this morning. Now, every Monday, I just provide you a summary of the big news that has happened in sports in the past week. This is supposed to be quick, easy, to the point, and my goal is that you can finish this newsletter in 10 minutes. So if you want to go and subscribe to that, then that link will also be down in the description box down below. Now, if you don't want to miss a single episode, then please be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Please be sure to turn on notifications. And if you really enjoyed this episode, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up so I can continue to make these types of videos. So with all that being said, let's get started. Now, this episode is going to be split into 5 sections. Now, the first section, we are going to be talking about college football. What the heck just happened? The college football national championship game. We've had a big transfer that was all about a lawsuit and a settlement. And oh my goodness, that whole thing was crazy. We have coaches that have been fired and hired and everything else. So we're going to be talking about all of that in section 1. Then we're going to be switching over into the NFL in section 2. Now, in the NFL, like I said beforehand, we are about to start the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is next week already, which is crazy. So we are going to be talking about all of that. We're going to be talking about some NFL news and things like that. Then we're going to switch over into basketball. We're going to start first with Unrivaled. We're going to talk about what happened so far with Unrivaled. Then we're going to switch over in section 4 to college basketball, talk about what's happening with women's college basketball and men's college basketball. And then we're going to conclude this episode with talking about the NBA and what has happened so far. So let's start first with college football. Now, we had the national championship game a couple of weeks ago. It has been crazy, and it's been insane, guys. It's been insane. So let's start first with Indiana, because I don't think anyone expected Indiana to be as good as they were for this season, okay? They were ranked number 2 in the country for the majority of the season. Of course, the number 1 team in the country was Ohio State, but then, of course, that flipped in a Big Ten championship game when Indiana ended up winning 13-10. Then we get into the college football playoffs, and Indiana beat the snot out of Alabama. They beat them 38-3. It was embarrassing. Then they beat Oregon in the semifinals of the college football playoffs, winning 56-22, which is also embarrassing. So then that's how they ended up at the national championship game. Then who else was there was a team that I think nobody was expecting. Number 10 seed Miami. Now, let's start first with the fact that people were debating as to whether Miami should be in over Notre Dame or should Notre Dame have been in over Miami. Now, both teams do have 2 losses, okay? Miami's losses were to Louisville, and it was to Southern Methodist in overtime. Notre Dame's 2 losses were to Miami week 1 and then Texas A&M week 2. So, the big debate. Who exactly would you want to put in, especially given that Notre Dame was ranked higher than Miami for pretty much a lot of the season? Last minute, the committee decided that they were going to switch things around and Miami was going to be in over Notre Dame. And me personally, I do believe that the committee made the right decision, because you should put Miami in over Notre Dame, given that Miami went and beat Notre Dame. So they already showed that they were the better team, but I digress. So now you get to the first round, okay? And they have to face Texas A&M in College Station. Texas A&M had a home game. Now, at this point, I think a lot of people were counting out Miami. They didn't think Miami was going to be able to do it, especially given the losses with Louisville and with Southern Methodist. And let me tell you something. Miami did not play the greatest game ever, but they still came out with a W. They won 10-7. So Miami was able to complete that win against Texas A&M. Now they had to move on. They had to face Ohio State. They had to face Ohio State at the Cotton Bowl in Texas. Okay, so remember, like I said beforehand, Ohio State was the number one team in the country for a lot of the season. Okay, ever since they beat Texas week 1, they were the number one team in the country. They only got dropped to number 2 because they lost to Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. Now, at that point, I think everybody was like, you know what? Miami is not going to make it. Ohio State is going to win. They are the reigning champs. They have a chip on their shoulder. They want to go back to back, things like that. And Miami's defense, the way they played, probably the best performance I think I have seen all season by the Hurricanes. The defense, especially with that pick 6 that they had in the first quarter, the defensive pressure that they put on Julian Sayin, I mean, Ohio State could not do anything. Miami ended up winning 24-14. Like, that was insane. That was so insane. So at that point, people are like, oh my goodness, like, this is crazy. And then we move on to the semifinals where Miami had to face Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss is without their head coach, Lane Kiffin, because he left to go to LSU, which I will talk about later. But Ole Miss was still playing a very good game. They played very good against Tulane. I mean, they really beat them down, clearly, and they beat Georgia, who was also having a great season. So, of course, going in, everyone is over here thinking, you know what? Miami may actually struggle against Ole Miss. And guess what? Miami played a great game against Ole Miss, won 31-27, and they are heading to the national championship game. Now, what's actually crazy about the national championship this year is the fact that it is held at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, which is the home stadium for the Hurricanes. So, aka Miami had another home game for the season, which was the big stage, the national championship game. Now, although Miami did play a pretty solid game, you could just tell that Indiana was on their game. The play calling was great by Curt Cignetti. I mean, the pressure that Indiana put on Miami's defense especially. I mean, when Indiana is over here gaining 7-8 yards of play, like, there is just nothing you could do. They knew they had to be focused on Malachi Toney. They knew they needed to be focused on Carson Beck. They knew exactly what they needed to do. They played such a great game, and Indiana ended up winning 27-21. Now, do I think that Miami should have won that game? Yes, especially as a Hurricanes fan, they should have won that game. But I have to give credit where credit is due because, like I said, Indiana played such a great game. And I'm not going to hold you here. I think Indiana's run this year is probably one of the best runs I think I have seen from a college football team in a while. Now, I know a lot of people are going to sit here and they're going to say, oh, well, what about LSU and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson? That was a great run. I'm not going to sit here and say that that run was not good because that was great. They were beating every team by like 20 points. Joe Burrow is throwing for like 1,000,000 yards a game. Like, that was insane. But what I'm going to say about Indiana and why I think that their run is so special is because of this, okay? It is Indiana. Let's start there. This isn't Alabama. This isn't Georgia. This isn't LSU. This isn't Ohio State. Like, right? Like, those are the teams that you expect to go undefeated, okay? Because it is Alabama, because it is Georgia, because it is Ohio State, right? Those are the schools that you expect for them to go undefeated and win, right? Because they're just known for football. This is Indiana. This is Indiana. Do you want to know the last time Indiana went undefeated for the season? It was 1945. So you're talking 80 years ago. That was the last time that Indiana went undefeated. Never mind having a winning record. They went undefeated this season, okay? And the way they were beating teams, do you guys remember in the regular season how much they beat Illinois by? And Illinois was a top 10 team at the time. Like, they beat them 63-9 or something like that. That is insane. And then for them to go all the way to the national championship game and then win too on top of being undefeated, that is the first time in program history that that has happened. Okay. And like I said, this is Indiana. This is not a school that you expect to have that type of run. Again, you expect that with LSU. You expect that with Alabama. You expect that with Ohio State. You don't expect that with Indiana. So to me, the fact that it is Indiana, I don't care that they have the backing of Mark Cuban. I don't care that they have the backing of a billionaire. The fact that it is Indiana and they were able to do that, insane. That is impressive. And that is why, to me, that run was even more insane and even more crazy than what it already is, because of the fact that this is Indiana. So, listen, it was a great game. I'm glad that this was not a blowout game, because I actually don't know what I would do if this was a blowout game. I mean, it was such a great game. Congratulations to Indiana for winning. And that was, like I said, that was a great, great game to watch. Now, shifting away from the college football playoffs, let's actually talk about some big news that has happened, which is, for one, Darian Mensah. What happened? First, there was a lawsuit, then there's a settlement. Mensah now is going to Miami. Like, what happened? So let's break this down, okay? So Darian Mensah is a transfer from Tulane. He transferred to Duke. Now, allegedly is that Darian actually signed a 2-year deal with Duke. Okay, he signed a 2-year NIL deal. He played for 1 year with Duke and then said, okay, you know what? I am going to go into the transfer portal. I don't want to be at Duke anymore. Duke went and sued Darian, being like, hey, you can't enter the transfer portal because of our contract. You need to be here for another year because we have the NIL rights to you, basically, right? Now, they end up having a settlement deal, and what I think personally is that Duke said, you know what, we'll let you go and enter the transfer portal, but you're going to have to pay us, right? Basically liquidated damages. And I am assuming, now, again, all speculations, don't know exactly, but what I think happened is that Miami went and paid them off. I think Miami covered those liquidated damages for Mensah, so that way Mensah can go and sign with Miami. He was already trying to sign with Miami in the first place. Okay, so this isn't one of those where it's like, we'll pay for your damages if you come sign with Miami. No, Mensah was already trying to go to Miami. It was just that Duke was blocking it, and as soon as they reached the settlement, then Miami said, you know what, we'll go over and we'll pay for it. That's at least my theory. That's my theory of what happened. But what this shows you is the fact that NIL is becoming a little insane. Like, why are collegiate athletes signing multi-year deals with schools? Like, that is so bad. You are not giving these athletes the opportunity to go and transfer if they feel that is best for their career. Why do they have to go and sign a 2-year deal with a school like Duke? Or even just any school. And it doesn't even have to be just football, just any school. Like, that to me is insane. Like, if you're going to do that, then make them employees, right? You can't have it to where they're not an employee, but then you want them to sign a multi-year deal for NIL rights. Like, that, no, that is crazy. I think, me personally, athletes should be on an annual basis. It should be an annual renewal basis, and they should be able to sign just 1-year deals. I'm sorry, if coaches can up and leave the way that they do, then I believe that players should be able to up and leave if they want to. And speaking of coaches, let's talk about 2 big coaching hires and fires that has happened this season. So, first one being LSU fired Brian Kelly this season. Now, LSU was extremely disappointing this season. They were in the top 25, and then they dropped out, and then they were in it again, and then they dropped out. And eventually, I think LSU said, you know what, this is enough, and they fired Brian Kelly. Now, Brian did go and sue LSU because LSU tried to say that this was an at-will cause, and Brian said, well, you didn't officially fire me, so you actually owe me the $54 million that was promised in my contract. And LSU said, no, we actually don't. And then that ended up being a settlement to where LSU officially owes him $54 million. Of course, with the exception that Brian Kelly does have to go and find another coaching job, so that way it can compensate for how much LSU actually owes him. Because basically LSU would have to pay him the difference of what his contract is for the new school versus his contract with LSU. Now, I do think that LSU should have gotten rid of Brian Kelly. I do think that was a good move because LSU is one of those schools that should not be struggling as badly as they were. Like, when I tell you that it was pretty embarrassing watching LSU and just kind of seeing, you know what, LSU is going to lose. Like, LSU is one of the biggest college football programs in the country. They are known for football. They are known for that. So for them to struggle as badly as they did, especially once Brian Kelly got there, I think at that point, I think the athletic director, I think everybody made a good move and they said, you know what, we need to get rid of him. Now, who they did go and pick up was Lane Kiffin. Now, Lane was already running it with Ole Miss. Ole Miss was a top 10 team this past season, and they offered that man about $90 million in his contract on top of another $20 million in NIL investments, aka the amount of money that he can pay players so that way they can go and go to LSU. Now, not only is LSU a big time program, but now you got the money for that. Oh my goodness, you're going to get so many 5-star recruits to want to go to LSU. Now, the thing with Lane Kiffin's hiring, though, is the fact that he left in the middle of the season, right? Ole Miss was going to the playoffs, and he was just ready to dip. He said, you know what? It's been cool. It's been fun. I am leaving now. Then on top of that, allegedly, he told all the coaches and said, if you are not on the flight with me, then you are not being hired. So that is why, as soon as Lane Kiffin left, the defensive coordinator had to step up and be the head coach for the team for the rest of the postseason. Now, the way Lane Kiffin, I personally think, did it was pretty slimy because you've seen the other coaches, right? Where they would coach their team until the end, and as soon as the regular season's over, then they say deuces. Lane Kiffin said deuces once he was hired. Like that Sunday, he left. And it's funny too because of the fact that he made a statement, he as in Lane, made a statement basically saying, oh, well, I wanted to go and continue coaching, and the team asked me to continue coaching, but the athletic director said no, right? So a lot of people were starting to feel bad until the players came out and they said, oh, you never asked that if you wanted to go and coach. We never asked you to continue on coaching. So Lane was kind of caught up in a little bit of a lie, but the way that he went about it, I think is really dirty. And I think that is what's going to turn a lot of people off. But him being at LSU is going to be really interesting because the standards at Ole Miss and standard at LSU is this type of difference. It's a huge jump because LSU has that name. LSU has that reputation. So when you are sitting up here and you are in LSU and Alabama or Georgia and Ohio State, you have huge shoes to fill. Okay, with Lane Kiffin, at least his predecessor was Brian Kelly, so all he has to do is just be better than that. But it's still the fact that it is LSU. It is the name, the reputation that he needs to uphold, which is a lot different than the reputation at Ole Miss. So it will be interesting to see how he performs while he is at LSU. Now, the second coaching hire that I want to talk about is James Franklin, because he was fired during the regular season. Now, me personally, I do believe that he was fired as soon as Penn State lost to UCLA. Now, let me provide some context. The big thing is that James Franklin is always known for not winning the big games. Okay, that has been everyone's beef. Is that no matter what, no matter if Penn State is a top 5 team, they're still ranked, they could do everything else, but as soon as you go and you face a big time school, a school that's also ranked, then you end up losing. Like, what is going on here? Okay, you even saw that last season with Penn State when they lost to Notre Dame in the playoffs, which everybody's like, you know what? Okay, forgivable. But for Penn State to be at home and they faced Oregon at home and they lost in overtime at home, right? That immediately told everybody, you know what? James Franklin needs to go. Okay, which I do believe that the athletic director was like, you know what? Let's see how it is, stuff like that. But as soon as Penn State lost to an unranked UCLA that is led by quarterback Nico Yamaleva, they were winless at that point. They were like 0-5, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. They were 0-5 at that point. And James Franklin gave UCLA, unranked UCLA, their first win of the season. I think at that point, that was when the AD was like, okay, you know what? Enough is enough. You have to go. Now, him being at Virginia Tech is actually really interesting because I do feel like the standard there is not as high. Here's why. Penn State is also pretty known for football, but they are a bigger football program than Virginia Tech. So, what does that mean? The standard at Virginia Tech is not that high. So, if Virginia Tech, for example, is ranked, right, AP top 25 team, now it makes him look a lot better. Even if he can't win the big games, guess what? You're still at Virginia Tech. You're not at a school like Penn State where the stakes are a lot higher. You are at Virginia Tech where if you do the same exact thing, you will be okay. So it will be interesting to see how James Franklin performs at Virginia Tech. And now with all that being said, now let's move on to section 2 and talk about what's happening in the NFL. So of course, big thing, we have to talk about the Super Bowl because this year we are getting a rematch. So with the NFC Championship game, we saw that the Seahawks went and beat the LA Rams. They beat them 31-27. This of course was led by players such as Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I think is going to win an award this year, which I will talk about later on, right? And the Seahawks defense is truly elite this year, right? They have a top tier defense. Like, it is insane. And then going into the AFC, the Patriots just barely beat the Broncos. They won 10-7. Drake May didn't have the greatest game, but you know what? They did just well enough to where they were able to beat the Broncos. The Broncos are without their star quarterback, Bo Nix, because he broke his ankle. Okay? Now, the fact that the Patriots were barely able to beat the Broncos without Bo Nix is a little concerning to me. Okay? The Seahawks still have all their players. They still have Rashid Shaheed. They still have Jackson Smith-Njigba. They have Sam Darnold, who's actually not having a bad season. They still have pretty much all of their defensive players, okay? And it's not like the Patriots are hurt either, right? They still have Drake May, who I think is also going to win an award, which I'll talk about later. They still have Stephon Diggs. They still have Booty. Like, they still have all of their players. So when it comes to the Super Bowl matchup, which I will talk about more predictions in next week's episode, I do think that there should be a little bit of concern about how the Patriots are going to perform against the Seahawks. But what I am excited about, though, is the fact that we get a rematch of the 2014 Super Bowl. Now, if you remember this, of course, this was between the Patriots and the Seahawks. This was when Russell Wilson was still with the Seahawks. This was when Tom Brady was still with the Patriots. And this was when you had that horrible play calling on 4th and inches. And instead of handing the ball to Marshawn Lynch, Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll decided that they want to go and throw the ball, and that's how the game ended. Like, I hope the Seahawks don't make that same mistake this year. But like I said, I'll talk about all of that in next week's episode. But I do think this is really exciting that we are going to get a rematch 10 plus years later. But what I want to talk about, though, are a few things that's happened in the NFL. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that Shedeur Sanders is a Pro Bowler in his rookie season. This is, of course, despite him being done dirty in the NFL draft. This is despite him not being able to practice with the starters. This is despite Stefanski not giving him a chance. He is still a Pro Bowler. And it's funny because a lot of people were looking and they said, well, I don't understand why Shedeur Sanders is a Pro Bowler, right? His QBR is probably one of the worst in the league. Which, yes, that is true. But I want you to think about the fact that the NFL had no choice but to put Shedeur in. What do I mean by this? Okay, so you have 16 quarterbacks in the AFC, okay? Josh Allen and Justin Herbert are in. So that means for an alternate, someone that can come in case a player is hurt, you have to pick from one of these 14 quarterbacks. Now, Drake May obviously can't play because he's about to play in the Super Bowl, okay? Trevor Lawrence was asked, and Trevor Lawrence said no. Okay, so you just eliminated 2 right there. So that puts you down to 12. Okay, so now you have Bo Nix that's currently out with a major injury. Patrick Mahomes is out right now with a major injury. You have Daniel Jones that's currently out with a major injury. Joe Burrow was out for a couple of months, where I don't think that he wants to risk getting re-injured. Lamar Jackson didn't have the healthiest season this season. Okay, so I've already eliminated 5. Tua, Geno, and Justin Fields were so bad this season that they got benched. So I don't think the NFL is going to ask them. CJ Stroud just got embarrassed during the AFC divisional rounds against the Patriots, that I don't think his ego could handle playing in the Pro Bowl this season. So Aaron Rodgers is old, right? So again, it's like, what options do you have? They're literally down to Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Okay. Now, who had the better season? Cam Ward, right? No one is going to deny that at all. However, who's going to bring more views? Who's going to bring more eyes to the Pro Bowl game, right? Who is it that people want to see more? They're going to want to see Shedeur more. Now, whether they ask Cam beforehand or not, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that it does make sense as to why Shedeur Sanders is a Pro Bowler, because they literally had no other choice. They had no choice but to pick him. Okay, and this is coming from someone who has defended Shedeur. I love watching him play. I loved watching him play at Jackson State. I loved watching him play at Colorado. I've been one of those people that have said that Shedeur was done dirty in the NFL draft. So this is no disrespect, but let's be honest. He did not have a Pro Bowl type of season, but the NFL had no other choice but to pick him. They had no other choice. So with people saying that, oh, I'm so confused as to why Shedeur was picked, this was why. Because who else are you going to ask? Literally, who else are you going to ask? You have no other option. So hopefully that clears that up. I hope people are understanding of that. And now let's actually move on to some coaching, firings, and hirings and everything else, because it has been insane. I've already talked about college football, and I only mentioned 2, okay? I've already mentioned 2 coaches, major coaches, that were hired. I've already talked about 2 coaches that were changing programs. I didn't even talk about the NFL right now. We're going to look at the NFL coaching and how much it has changed and this and that, because it's been crazy. So let's start first with the big one, okay? Mike Tomlin stepped down from being the Steelers head coach after 19 seasons. Now, allegedly, according to Art Rooney, who is the president and the owner of the Steelers organization, allegedly he spoke in an interview and said that Tomlin was focused more on family than on football. Okay. Now, me personally, I do think that it was because of the fact that so many people have called for him to be fired that he just said, you know what, I'm just going to step down. Y'all have fun. And I also do believe that Art Rooney also probably had a conversation with him and probably said, hey, look, this is the word on the street. I respect you too much. You do what you want to do. Do I think that he was pushed out? I don't think so, in the sense of them forcing him to step down. I think this was probably more of a, hey, you have a choice of either I fire you or you step down on your own. And I think Tomlin just kind of said, you know what, I'm just going to step down. That is my, at least, personal opinion. Now, it is crazy because I was one of those people that said that Mike Tomlin needed to go. I'm not going to lie. I did say that. Okay? It was frustrating watching 10 years of the Steelers having a winning record, go to the playoffs, and then getting bumped in the wild card. Okay? That gets frustrating after a while. It's like, where does everything change? However, what I will say, though, is Mike Tomlin has been my coach for my entire life, basically. So it will be weird, right, seeing a new coach be in that position, because I'm so used to seeing Mike Tomlin there. I'm so used to seeing Mike Tomlin walk out in post-game conferences or talk about we don't care or talk about the standard is the standard. It will be weird seeing that for next season. And speaking of new coach, the Steelers officially hired Mike McCarthy. Now, if you don't remember who he was actually the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys last season before Jerry Jones went and fired him. Now, me personally, do I think that Mike McCarthy did a bad job with Dallas? I don't think so. Me personally, I felt like it was more of the play calling that was the issue. And I don't think he should have been the one that been fired, but I digress. But I think what's interesting about this is that the Steelers went from Mike Tomlin to Mike Tomlin 2.0. Like, there was no increase, there was no decrease. Like, it just went from Mike Tomlin to Mike Tomlin 2.0. Now, do I think that the Steelers are going to have a winning season? Yeah, I do. Do I think that the Steelers are going to go to the Super Bowl? No. It also depends on who we're going to get as our OC, because Arthur Smith is going to be leaving the Steelers to go to Ohio State. So that also is a big factor of what's going to happen with the Steelers. But with Mike McCarthy, it's not like we got a coach that was like better than Tomlin. It was just we got a coach that is the exact same as Tomlin. So the way the Steelers are going to operate this next season is going to be really interesting. And it's going to be interesting to see if Mike McCarthy will be the reason why Aaron Rodgers comes back, or, if they're going to pick up a new quarterback, whatever it may be. I think this is going to be really interesting. Now, another coach that I want to talk about is John Harbaugh, because he was fired by the Ravens. Now, what's really funny about this is the fact that I felt like Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh were basically in the same boat, where they kind of knew that they were going to be fired. Now, Tomlin was hired in like 2007, 2008. Harbaugh was hired like 2008, 2009. Okay, so they have been coaching with their relative teams for a very long time. Now, what I will say about Tomlin is that at least the Steelers go to the playoffs every year, pretty much. I think there were 2 seasons where the Steelers did not make it to the playoffs, but for the most part, the Steelers do go to the playoffs, okay? Harbaugh was kind of like an up and down kind of thing, where if they do go to the playoffs, they get bumped, right? But other than that, it's kind of like an up or down. Like, you can't really expect going to the playoffs every single year or not with Harbaugh. So with the Ravens firing John Harbaugh, I already kind of saw that. I already saw that coming, because I'm sure Ravens fans were also frustrated with, okay, where is the progression? Okay, yes, the Ravens won the Super Bowl back in like 2013, 2014. Okay, that was over 10 years ago. What have the Ravens done since then? Because you have Lamar Jackson, you have Derrick Henry, okay? Your defense is pretty solid. What is the issue? What exactly is the issue? So now it will be interesting to see who the Ravens decide to hire as their new head coach. But Harbaugh was just hired by the New York Giants. Now, I do think that this is a good hire, because you already have Jackson Dart, you already have Cam Scatterbo, who already showed that they can perform in that New York market, where it's already huge in and of itself. Okay, the Giants need to fix their line. The Giants need better play calling. They just need better oversight. And I do think that Harbaugh has the personality, he has the persona to be able to be in that market. I actually do think that the Giants are going to do a lot better with Harbaugh than they did with Dabble, but let's actually see what happens with the Giants. Now, Mike McDaniel was fired by the Dolphins, and he is now the offensive coordinator with the LA Chargers. Now, I do think this was a good hire by the Chargers, because I do think he actually makes a really good offensive coordinator. Okay, I think the problem is just the defense. Mike McDaniel, to me, is not the greatest head coach in the world, but I do think he'll make a very, very good offensive coordinator, especially when you have Omarion Hampton and Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey. I do think that he will set them up, create the play calls for the Chargers to be successful. So I do think that this was a good hire by the Chargers. Now with the Dolphins, it will be interesting to see who they hire as their next head coach. And I can go on and on and on and on and on, but I'm not going to do that because I will make this episode way too long. But my point is that we are going to see a lot of changes for the next season. It's not just 1 or 2 coaches that have been fired and then someone else got hired, stuff like that. We've had like 9 or 10 coaches get fired and then hired somewhere else, things like that. So the NFL season for next season is going to be insane. Like seeing new faces with new teams and everything else. Like, I am really excited to watch what happens with next season. Now, before we move on to the next section and talk about basketball, I want to talk about the NFL awards and who I think are going to be winning each major award. Now, starting first with the NFL Offensive Player of the Year, I do think that is going to go to the Seahawks' Jackson Smith-Njigba. He is leading the league in total receiving yards, and he is a big reason as to why the Seahawks are doing as well as they are doing right now. I think that's no questions asked. Now, if you asked me a few weeks ago, I would have said, oh, Jonathan Taylor is also in that conversation. But right now, especially with the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl, absolutely, I do believe that that award is going to go to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Now, NFL Defensive Player of the Year, I mean, that should be going to Myles Garrett. I don't think there's any other player that you can really give it to. I mean, Myles Garrett just set the record for the most sacks in a season, right? Even though they went and they screwed another player, but like, I digress. He still set the record for the most sacks in a season. If the NFL decides to give it to somebody else, I don't think I would be any more confused as I would be at that point. Because I feel like the answer is clear. Just like how I think the answer is clear that Offensive Player of the Year is Jackson Smith and Jigba, Defensive Player of the Year is Myles Garrett. Nobody else. It goes to Myles Garrett. Okay? Now, we have Comeback Player of the Year. I think that absolutely should go to Christian McCaffrey. Him going from last season, where he only played in one game and then was out for the rest of the season, to then him playing every single game this season and having such a good season. Like, especially with George Kittle being out and Jawan Jennings being in and out and Brock Purdy not having the healthiest season, okay? Christian McCaffrey was always there. He is the main focal point when it comes to the offense. So with him having such a good season after being out last season, absolutely, Comeback Player of the Year should go to Christian McCaffrey. Now, NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, it should go to McMillan from Carolina. I would have said a few weeks ago Mika Ibuka, but the fact that the Panthers went to the playoffs this year, and McMillan is one of the big reasons as to why they went to the playoffs this year. Yeah, you can give it to McMillan. I'm okay with that. I would really love for Eggy to also go and get it, but McMillan, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with him getting it, okay? Now, for Defensive Rookie of the Year, I do think that that should go to Carson Schwarzenegger. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Please don't come after me if I mispronounced it. But the linebacker from Cincinnati, I do think that it should go to him. I don't think there are any other defensive players that really made a statement the same way Carson did. Now, for the big one, for NFL MVP. Now, a lot of people think that they should be adding in, Christian McCaffrey, which, no, I don't think so. I think NFL MVP this season is Drake May. Now, if you asked me earlier, I would have said Daniel Jones. But, of course, Daniel Jones is out. The major injury. He was out for the entire season. He may not even play the first half of next season. Who knows, right? But I do think it should go to Drake May, especially given, if you look at the roster, like, he doesn't have the Puka Nacua like what Matt Stafford has. He doesn't have, like, a lot of really solid star power offensive weapons. And for him to have the season that he did this season, I was kind of overlooking him. I'm not going to lie. I was this season, right? But really, I ain't paying attention to how he was performing with what he had for this season. Oh, absolutely. NFL MVP should be going to Drake May. He is having an incredible season. Now, Matt Stafford, I would love for him to have a really good season, but I do think that Drake May honestly deserves it this season. So, now with all of that, let's move on to section 3, which talks about Unrivaled. Now, Unrivaled is in its second season. If you don't know what Unrivaled is a brand new 3-on-3 women's basketball league that was started by Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart, 2 star players in the WNBA. Now, when you look at the rankings, right, you can see that the Lacers right now are first, followed by the Miss, and then the Rose. It has been such a great season. We saw Paige Beckers not that long ago drop like 40 points. Right? We've seen so many great players in Unrivaled, and this is where it's going to become my quick point about Unrivaled, is that I don't understand why more people are not talking about this. I already kind of made a TikTok video about it, but I want to go more into details, okay? Right now, Unrivaled is going to Philly, okay? They usually play in Miami. Right now, they are in Philly. Their tickets cost more than the 76ers ticket, right? That is a fact. Their tickets for this past weekend in Philly is more than the tickets for the Philadelphia 76ers game. And guess what? Guess who gets more of the marketing? The 76ers. Okay. Now, I'm not over here trying to say that, oh, the Unrivaled League has as much money and as much as of a budget as the NBA, stuff like that. That's not what I'm saying, okay? Because I know factually that's not true. What I'm saying, though, is when you look at people on social media, okay, you see a lot more people talking about the 76ers than they do about Unrivaled. And I don't want to hear the, oh, well, Caitlin Clark is not in and Angel Reese, because I get it, right? You don't have the big stars in. You don't have Asia Wilson. You don't have Angel Reese. You don't have Caitlin Clark. You don't have Nafisa Collier. Okay, I get that. But that doesn't mean that you don't have great players that are in Unrivaled. You have Paige Becker, you have Sonia Citron, who are going band for band and who is going to be Rookie of the Year in the WNBA this past season. You have Kelsey Plum, you have Cameron Brink, you have Alicia Gray, you have Jackie Young. You have so many great players that you don't need to focus on the same ones. Okay, you can look at other players that are also in the WNBA that are also great players, and you can go and watch them play. And I also don't want to hear people talk about 3x3 or 3-on-3 basketball is not real basketball. Since when? Since when? Since when is that not real basketball? This isn't the WNBA where the standard is it has to be 5-on-5. Okay, guess what? This is a 3-on-3. Okay, which to me is just as exciting as a 5-on-5 basketball game, right? Now, if you're upset because you don't see the dunks and everything else, guess what? That is not all basketball. Okay, what do I mean by this? Because I know I'm going to get some people that are going to comment and say, what do you mean that's not basketball? No, what I mean is that when you look at pure basketball, okay, it's not only about the dunks and how far you can shoot, stuff like that. It's about, do you have good ball handling skills? Do you have good passing skills? Do you play really good defense? Which, if you actually watch the women's basketball, if you watch Unrivaled, you will see that all of that is the case. So when people say that that's not real basketball, I'm really confused because that literally is real basketball. Just because it's not a 5-on-5 doesn't mean that it's not real basketball. Now, if you're someone that you just say, oh, you know what, I tried watching Unrivaled and I'm not interested, that's perfectly fine. But for those of you that never watched Unrivaled and you're just making assumptions, I want you to please just put on a game for once. And if you watch that game, and I want you to watch it without a bias, okay? Because I don't want you walking in, watching the game, and being like, oh, I already know this is going to be boring. No, I want you to come in with an open mind, okay? Go in with an open mind and watch the game, okay? And if you don't enjoy it for whatever reason, you're like, oh, you know what? I feel like I prefer the 5-on-5, or I prefer this, I prefer that. Perfectly fine. But I really want you all to just give Unrivaled a chance, okay? Now, for those of you that say, oh, this league is not going to survive, I actually do think this is going to survive, and I do think this league is going to grow. I really do believe so. I think that especially for those who are not going to go to the WNBA for whatever reason it may be, they're going to go to Unrivaled. It's just going to serve as a second option. It's almost like how there's the NBA and then there's the G League. Unrivaled will be seen eventually as the WNBA's G League. That's, at least in my opinion, how it's going to grow into. Okay? So, what I want you all to do, what I implore you to do, is just turn on the TV, go to TNT on a weekend whenever an Unrivaled game is, and just watch a game. Please. That's all I ask for. Just watch a game, unbiased, just watch it through, and then make your judgment on there, because I promise you, Unrivaled is a lot different than what you think it is. Now, with all that being said, now let's move on to the next section where we're going to be talking about college basketball. So let's start first with women's basketball. Now, women's college basketball has been insane. UConn is currently the top team in the country. They're the only team right now that is undefeated, and they have been beating teams like they have a chip on their shoulder. You would have thought they lost the national championship last year, the way they are playing right now. Mind you, they won the national championship, for those of you who don't know. Okay? I want you to please, just watch a UConn game, and please just watch, how insane it is. It doesn't matter who they play. They just played Notre Dame, who's a top 25 team, and they beat them by 30 points. UConn has a really good chance of running it back, going to the national championship, and winning. I really don't know another team that can compete with UConn this year. I really don't. Like, I'm thinking Vanderbilt with Michaela Blakes because she's having such a great season. I'm thinking Iowa State with Audie Crooks. I'm thinking UCLA with Lauren Betts. I'm thinking LSU with Flauget and all of them. I cannot think of a team that really can go toe to toe with UConn. I really can't. And we would have to wait to see how teams progress, how much they get better. But I really do believe that UConn is going to be running through this season like how they did last season. And I think the biggest reason why is because they have two players on that team that's having such a great season. They have Sarah Strong, who is having a 60, 40, 90 season or some insane video game numbers like that. You have AZ Fudd, who basically has not missed a free throw this season, if I'm not mistaken. She's only missed 8 in her entire career. She's having a great season, right? And then on top of that, they have such a deep bench. Blanca Quinones is having a great season, right? So they have so many great players on that team. That bench is so deep that you can't outrun them. You can't tire them out because all Gino's going to do is just make a switch and they're not going to miss a beat. So that's what I'm saying when I say I don't think there is another team that can compete with UConn. I could be wrong, but right now, as far as what I'm seeing, I don't see another team that can compete with them. Now, looking at other teams, right, such as USC, such as Southern Cal, right, Jazzy Davidson to me is the best freshman in the country. No one can argue with me about that. Jazzy Davidson is probably the reason as to why USC is doing as well as they are. They're currently not ranked right now. I'm sure that is going to change with the rankings that are coming out as soon as this video is up. But Jazzy Davidson is single-handedly carrying that team. I'm sorry. She really is. Right? And she is such a great player. And I fully believe in my heart that if Juju was healthy and her and Jazzy were in the backcourt, that would be a scary duo. Like, that's a duo that I think the entire country needs to look out for. Especially next season, where I do believe that Juju will be healthy, because then Jazzy would be a sophomore at that point. So, let me tell you something. Those two in the backcourt, insane. Now we have LSU, right, where it seems like they're finding their rhythm again, because they were beating all of the teams by like, 30, 40, whatever it may be. And these were all the teams that were pretty much unranked, right? But as soon as they went and they faced back-to-back ranked teams, they ended up losing back-to-back. So now a lot of people were questioning, well, is LSU really a legit team, or are they overrated? Are they a bunch of frauds, basically? But as soon as they went and they beat Texas, they've already solidified to everybody, you know what? We're here to stay and we are competitive. Now, I do think LSU is a good team, okay? They've been a good team for the past few years, okay? I don't question Kim Mulkey at all. What I am concerned about is when you have to face those South Carolinas, those UConns, those UCLAs. Those type of teams, I think, will give LSU a little bit of struggle just because those girls can outrun them, and they have the big girls that can go and grab those rebounds. I mean, that is going to be a struggle and a half that I think LSU is going to face. But I do think that LSU is also going to go into the tournament, and I do think that they are going to be able to be competitive. I don't know if they're going to be able to make it to the championship, though. That's just my personal opinion. And so that's enough of women's basketball for now. Now let's switch over to men's basketball. Now in men's basketball, Arizona is the only team that is undefeated. Underneath UConn and underneath Michigan, right? All of those teams, they have like 1 or 2 losses. Arizona is the only one with a perfect record right now. And the reason why is because you have Braden Burries that is right now putting up like 16 points a game. He's leading the team in scoring. Then you have Toby Awaka that is leading their team in rebounds, getting about 10 rebounds a game. They have such a complete team that I do think that they are going to be a scary team going into March Madness. Now, do I think Michigan and UConn and all those teams could also be competitive? I do. I don't think there's necessarily one team like how UConn is with women's basketball. I don't think there is going to be one team where I think they're just going to dominate anybody and no one can really compete with them. I do. I do think there are teams that can compete with Arizona. But right now, the way they are playing, I do think that Arizona is going to make a serious run in the college basketball tournament in March Madness. Now, Duke is also doing very well, especially with Cameron Boozer, who's putting up double doubles. Texas Tech is doing very well with JT Toppin, who's putting up like 35 and 13 and numbers like that, which is insane. You have Houston that's also having a great season. Like, you have so many teams in men's college basketball that's having such a great season that it's just insane to see who is going to win the national championship this year. I genuinely don't know. Like I said, with women's basketball, I have right now a 70% feeling that UConn is going to win in women's college basketball. Right? I've already said that. But with men's college basketball, like I said, Texas Tech, Houston, even BYU with AJ Dabansa, right? You have Arizona, you have Michigan, you have UConn. You have so many great teams this season, even Kansas, right? With Darren Peterson, who's supposed to be the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft, right? You have so many different teams that are having such great seasons, that are doing so well, that I think because everyone can compete with everyone, it is really hard right now to see who is going to win the national championship this season. So we will have to wait till closer to March Madness to really make a prediction as to who is going to win. But now I want to switch over to the last section, which is going to be all about the NBA. Now, the Detroit Pistons are currently the top team in the Eastern Conference, which is very crazy to say because everyone remembers a few years ago when the Detroit Pistons were basically the laughing stock of the NBA. They were the team that everyone kind of looked at. They were like, okay, you know what? The Pistons suck. They are not going to go anywhere. They're just going to keep getting first round picks, things like that. They went from that to now being the top team in the Eastern Conference, right? Not the Knicks, not the Celtics, not the Cavs, none of them, the Pistons. Which is crazy because if you were to ask me a few years ago if I thought the Pistons were going to be a number 1 team in the Eastern Conference, I would have told you no. I would have looked at you and been like, are you insane? Have you seen them right now? No. But right now they're playing really good ball. Cade Cunningham is being Cade Cunningham. He is a great player. And I'm glad more people are recognizing how great of a player he is. I feel like after he was drafted number 1 overall, a lot of people kind of forgot about him because the Pistons were not doing anything. But I think now that he has some help and now that the team is rolling, I think a lot more people are focusing on him. So that's what's going on in the Eastern Conference. Now in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the current NBA Finals champs, are the number 1 team in the Western Conference. Now, they, of course, have a great team. Everyone knows that. Everyone saw that last season. They have such a great team. But what I do think, though, is there are going to be some teams that are going to threaten them, okay? The Denver Nuggets being one of them with Nikola Jokic. The LA Lakers right now with Luka and how he is playing so far. Just to name a couple, I think those are teams that, even the Minnesota Timberwolves that just beat them, right? So I think that there are a few teams that are going to be competitive with the Thunder. You have so many good teams in the Western Conference that I cannot confidently say that the Thunder is going to make a run again the same way they did last season. Like I said, the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, the Lakers, they can all seriously be contenders for the NBA Finals this season. I know it's speaking a little bit early right now, right? Making a very early prediction. But that right now is what I am seeing so far. But like I said, my opinion could change later on in the season. But now what I want to talk about, though, is a big trade that has happened this season. That is Trae Young leaving the Atlanta Hawks to go to Washington, D.C. He did get traded to the Washington Wizards. Now, a lot of people seem to be confused about this. They were like, oh, I don't understand why he went and decided to go to Washington. Why was Washington his number 1 choice? And it all comes down to this thing. And that is Trae Young wants to be the man again. Okay? What do I mean by this? Trae Young was the man when he was drafted by Atlanta, okay? Everyone looked at him as the savior. Everyone looked at him when the Hawks were running through the playoffs, right? Remember the time when he went and made Ben Simmons scared when Ben Simmons was playing for the Sixers and he had to pass it off to Matisse Thybulle, who was double teamed, right? No one's forgot about that. Remember the Hawks when they went and faced the New York Knicks and it got to the point that the fans were chanting F Trae Young because Trae Young was putting up 30, 40 points a game and allowed Atlanta to advance, right? He was the man at that point. He was also the man when he played at Oklahoma, right? In his college days. He was the man. But now, for the past few seasons, the Hawks have been struggling. They have been struggling to the point that Trae Young is putting up the same number of shots, but it's just not meaning anything, okay? Right? He's not really efficient, right? Everyone knows he's a high volume shooter that's not really efficient. And right now, the Hawks are almost seen as a laughing stock. So right now, he's probably thinking, you know what? I'm up there, in age. I'm not the youngest player in the world, so I want to go somewhere where I can be the man again. And where's it going to go to? The Spurs? No, because guess what? Wemby over there is the man. You're not going to go to the Lakers because Luka is the man over there. You're not going to go to the Timberwolves because guess what? Anthony Edwards is the man over there. OKC, Shea's the man over there. New York Knicks, guess what? Jalen Brunson is the man over there, right? So what team is there really in the NBA that doesn't even have like that man? And that is the Washington Wizards, who are also seen as a laughingstock in the NBA. Like, let's just be honest. So with Trae Young going to Washington, now it's okay, I have a little bit more freedom. I can do kind of what I want. And also, too, I am the man. So if the Wizards start performing a lot better, now a lot of people will attribute that to Trae. Okay, so that is exactly why Trae Young went and wanted to go to Washington. I don't think that was really that hard because I already knew what that was about as soon as that was reported. So let's just see how Trae performs while he's in DC. Now, I want to talk about one more thing before we conclude this episode, and that is that the Jordan brand is discontinuing Zion's shoe line. The Zion 4s that were released recently or maybe a year ago, whatever, those are the last shoe lines that Jordan is releasing. So, why is this the case? So, Zion signed his sneaker deal with Jordan back in 2019 when he was playing at Duke. Now, this was considered the biggest shoe deal for a collegiate basketball athlete like ever. Okay, it was such a big deal because of how big of a name Zion was at Duke. Okay, now that deal was for 7 years, which means that 2026 would be the last year on this contract. Okay, now will Jordan and Zion, sign another deal so that way Zion can release more Jordan branded sneakers? Yeah, I'm sure they could, especially depending on how Jordan views Zion, whether they want to continue it. But if not, Zion will be going into sneaker free agency and can sign with another sneaker deal. Now, we have seen with Zion in the past few seasons, he's been very injury prone, right? Not really participating in the NBA. No one's really paying attention to him. He has so much potential to be such a dominant and great player. It's just the injuries that's been basically ruining his career. Now, whether Jordan Brand is going to take that into consideration when it comes to these sneakers is unknown. Because if Zion's shoes are selling out, then maybe Jordan could overlook what's happening in the NBA and could just focus on this. But if Zion's shoes are not selling out, and also too, Zion is starting to seen as just an injury-prone player that no one really wants to deal with anymore, Jordan may actually make this their one and only contract with Zion. So we're going to have to wait for updates on that to see what happens with Zion. Is Zion going to sign another contract with the Jordan brand, or just as what happened with Steph Curry and Under Armour, are they just going to terminate the contract and Zion is just going to go into sneaker free agency? We're going to have to wait to see what happens there. But that is all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to tune in next Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, where the next episode of Ball Talk with Chanel will be out. See you then.